Welcome back everyone to the next part of this tier list. So I'd like to just get right back into this. If you want to know a little background information and didn't see the previous video, I encourage you to watch it first. The link to it will be in the description. One thing I did forget to mention yesterday is that this list is mostly focused on post-game. Super bosses and challenge mode on both normal and Bringer of Chaos difficulties are the main things being considered. Before post-game and max optimization is still considered somewhat, but for the most part this is going to be for players who have beaten the game, are in New Game Plus, and want to take their team to the next level. So let's continue on with the D tier blades and get right to number 40. At spot 40, we get to the last of the non-DLC bit balls with Boreas. As I explained in the previous video, oftentimes the bit ball isn't going to be a fantastic weapon class due to its very low attack and focus on healing. It also doesn't help that none of them have access to any driver combo coverage for utility outside of a singular break art on Nia. The best user of bit balls is Zeke, who has a low cooldown art that can fully heal the party at basically any time with Shell Shot, and a very low cooldown art that can cancel into itself in Pulverizing Dunk. But even with these perks, bit balls are in the lower half of damage, and they're even worse on other drivers. Boreas in particular has some useful individual buffs to himself that can make him a more consistent and stronger option than the other bit balls. He gets 45% evasion at max affinity, which can be paired with agility stacking or any other evasion orms to make him nearly unhittable so he can always do his job of healing. Any enemy that actually does attack him can also be inflicted with knockback, and this can be useful for interrupting multi-hit moves. Everything he does with his specials to arts have a large focus on healing, and his consistent tankiness along with his defenses and evasion, along with his HP mod, make him one of the better healers just by virtue of the others not being too great. An additional plus that could be in his favor is how incredibly easy it is to max his chart, being one of the easiest blades to reach S rank on. However, Boreas still isn't one of the better blades. With only one aux core slot, he actually has the lowest damage output of all the bit balls, but this isn't super important since the others aren't really ever going to be used for damage anyway. It's worth mentioning that it can be difficult to take advantage of his evasion and knockback passive since she likely won't ever be obtaining aggro, so these act more as a safety net than anything. Healing upon killing enemies isn't really ever going to be useful with how many sources of healing he already has, and as usual, healing strength usually isn't that valuable later into the game as many more options become available to the player. All in all, this allows Boreas to be placed marginally higher than his fellow bit balls, but does not make him not a largely outclassed and ineffective blade overall. At 39, we continue with our trend of generally bad weapon types and finally get to the last of our non-DLC shield hammers in Cassandra, who is quite a bit higher than the other three. And while Cassandra is still ranked pretty low because of how bad shield hammers are, she definitely has a lot more going for her as a blade. She gets access to 2 aux core slots, a 50% damage additive from the front, and a passive that increases all her aggro gain by 30% and increases it slightly every second. With these small changes, she can already take aggro much better than her other fellow shield hammers, and her damage is noticeably better as well. Her level 2 special is fast and has a very strong damage effect that she can consistently take advantage of. Her ability to crit heal without a medal with fortune can be very valuable on team setups without a designated healer, since she can potentially free up an accessory slot allowing her to do more damage. This will further allow her to keep aggro better compared to her other hammers. And as is the case with the others, she has decent driver combo coverage with a topple and launch art, as well as a healing shield art on the male drivers and a form of damage reduction as well. And as one last final bonus, she has a dark blade giving her a doom immunity and access to some of the best blade combos in the game. But with all that being said, it's not all roses and sunshine for her either. Her low critical rate makes crit healing an unreliable source of health regeneration. In addition, shield hammers still suck, and those terrible animations and low ratios are definitely not helping her, keeping her firmly in the lower half of DPS. Her level 1 and level 3 specials are pretty slow and not worth using, and her ability to get aggro can still suffer with all the powerful attacks blades in the game. And as usual, if she can't keep aggro, she can't be a tank. The positives of Cassandra make her much better than other hammers, but hammers are still terrible and Cassandra cannot escape the reality of her weapon. For the next blade on our list, we have Perdido. Perdido is one of the Torna blades and is pretty much just a massive gimmick cannon with a lot of auto attack damage. It's honestly kind of hard to think of many things to say about him. His ability for his auto attacks to do more damage than arts allows him to get away without running art recharge pouch items, and his specials can be beefed up because of this. He additionally gets extra damage from the front and can always reliably heal himself with a diamond accessory. His auto attack damage can definitely hurt if it's set up to with items like a breakstone, and you can easily auto attack cancel to increase the effectiveness of them. As a blade, he offers a dexterity and strength boost with his weapon, which can be useful. And now all of this sounds good, but the simple fact of the matter is that auto attack damage is just low and weak for the most part. And while he has more DPS than a lot of weaker attack blades, it still isn't great to rely on auto attack damage. You charge specials slower and you'll be outdamaged by characters with powerful art damage every single time. As a cannon, he can only really offer break for driver combo coverage, giving him virtually no utility, and his actual arts are pretty weak for an attack blade. His defenses are among the weakest in the game, and he's just outclassed by so many better options as a cannon and as a fire blade. He doesn't even offer anything unique to a team to fill a niche worth using, so Perdido is typically not the best. And because we like the Torna blades just that much, the next blade we have is another one, Cressidus. And similarly with Perdido, there isn't really much to say about him. He's just an average all-around blade who doesn't really offer a ton to a team. His major benefits are being a tanky knuckle clone, so he has access to some fast, high-ratio arts, as well as some good animations and driver combo coverage depending on the driver he's placed on. As more of a face tank blade, he outshines most of the shield hammers with his large defenses, respectable damage, and very high HP modifier. His level 4 special is actually very strong with an increased critical damage effect as well as the increased damage on it. He offers some minimal additional utility to teams with increased topple duration, but for the most part this isn't really going to be noticeable or easy to take advantage given his weaker amount of hits on his specials. Outside of those perks, he doesn't really do anything. Trespass is very underwhelming and not really a source of damage you should ever worry about, and his 10% critical rate is abysmal. His specials are very low hit count, but he does have a heal on his level 3. The main strength to Cressidus is that he's a face tank blade and he's not a shield hammer, which automatically makes him not extremely outclassed. He'll have an easier time getting aggro than any of the other hammers bar Cassandra, which means you can do an okay job as a tank, but his damage still isn't really noticeable and his uses as a blade are pretty limited. Cressidus is quite simply an average blade you probably only want to use if you have no better option, and given you're in New Game Plus, you probably have plenty of better options. So starting here with Blade 36, this is where the start of C tier begins. These blades are usually not going to see a ton of play and are still outclassed in many ways, but may occasionally have some niche uses and still be decent enough all around to consider using in certain scenarios. The first of these blades is Perun, who has one heck of a niche use, and outside of that she is pretty bad. So let's discuss what she can do first. Perun gets a massive damage boost if she has any dead allies or any allies under 40% HP. She'll easily get a larger damage bonus than most blades and approach the top half of damage blades easily. Additionally, she has one of the best level 1 specials in the entire game by virtue of it being an entire 16 hits. Having a 16 hit level 1 special gives her a solid situational use in low round chain attack speed kills, since she is one of the only blades who can do a large amount of damage in the first round. This one singular trait can prove invaluable and is usually combined with her strong damage boost if she has an ally under 40% HP. She also has Lance Driver combo access with Break on Rex and a fast smash art on Morag. Now outside of that, Perun is pretty bad. She has the worst DPS output of all the attack blades, she has no dead or low HP allies, and it's not even close. Her one aux core slot and skill tree focusing on auto attack damage doesn't really help her here either, because she doesn't do anything really noticeable with auto attacks either. In most situations, having a low HP or dead ally is only going to be a hindrance, making her damage increase not too useful. Her other specials besides her level 1 are also pretty terrible, and as a blade she doesn't really have any reason to ever be used even with that passive outside of her level 1 special and chain attacks. And even then it's only in easy and normal mode. In summary, Perun is situationally useful, but as a whole she is still pretty bad. Similar to Perun, the next blade on this list shines more for her specific niche rather than her general use. Abrona is a twin ring clone and easily the worst of them. While rings typically have some really great animations, Abrona just does not have the damage with 0 additives and only 2 aux core slots to really take advantage of the skill ring set, and as such she ends up having the second lowest unconditional damage output of all attacking blades, even losing to Rock. The effects of her arts aren't as strong as other ring clones either. What she does have going for her though is the second best break art in the entire game. Similar to most break arts, it only applies on a single hit, but the total art is 4 hits and has a critical recharge effect that works fairly often thanks to her 25% critical rate. This often gives her many chances to try to break an enemy. Break is the driver combo that leads into everything else, so having a very good break art is a very valuable niche since it can lead to fusion combos, smashing, and a number of other effects. Outside of the very best break art, her break art easily outclasses most options, and if you need a breaker or just hate Tora, or in the rare situation where it would be better to not have Tora for a break, then Abrona is the best breaker in the game, and that's at least something worth using her for. Outside of that, she's kind of weak. Since rings typically have longer cooldowns, having faster auto attack can synergize with this somewhat, and her level 1 special has the third highest amount of hits in the game with 8, but her battle skills are still mostly useless. Aggro reduction from auto attacking is very useless with her already weak damage, and being able to swap to her quickly isn't ever really going to be that useful. Since her critical rate is fixed to 25% and her break art is a 4-hit physical art, it can easily be blocked or go on full cooldown, and also isn't crazy reliable to always crit. She offers basically no utility outside of this break art, and for an attack blade her damage is awful. There's unfortunately just not too many reasons to use or consider Abrona as a blade. Next we're moving on to another pick that may come as a shock to be this low in Poppi Alpha. And while she is a very customizable Poppi form with a lot of versatility, the fact of the matter is that her kit means no matter how you build her, she's still going to suffer from the same problems as the Shield Hammer class blades. Don't get me wrong, Poppi Alpha can easily be built to be the best wall in the game with massive defenses and forms of damage reduction with the second highest block rate, ultimate shield, survivor shoes, and other forms of damage reduction along with her shield art. But unless you just have a ton of time and want to play the really slow game, she's just not going to be an effective pick in most scenarios. No matter how you build her, the maximum amount of damage she is capable of is among the worst, and if you're building her for defense, it likely is worse than even Finch or Lecture because her art animations and specials are just that bad. And as I discussed about the other shield hammers, her pathetic damage means she is going to struggle majorly to even obtain aggro unless she gets aggro from Poppi Cutie Pie taking it, at which point you should probably just use Cutie Pie anyway because she really overshadows Poppi Alpha as a blade. She does get a neat topple art that can give Tora access to the full driver combo, which can be nice, and her versatility and customization options mean she can never truly be a bad blade since she has access to many elements and special accessory effects and skill RAM, and being the strongest defensive wall in the game does count for something. But unless you plan on constantly reviving allies, it's not exactly something ultra useful considering how crazy hard it will be to even get aggro without help. But at the very least, she can function as a fantastic stat stick for Poppi Cutie Pie, so that can at least count for something, right? So next up we get to the second katana blade, Percival. Now Percival is a blade who has a clearly defined reason to use him versus reason not to. If you're in a multi-enemy fight or in the wave format of challenge mode, he becomes the Grim Reaper God of Death he's modeled after with his absolutely insane 300% damage increasing additive, which is the highest of all tank class blades. If you're fighting a single enemy or a unique monster with no way to get that 300%, then he's incredibly weak. His damage in multi-enemy fights easily makes him surpass all the katana and almost every tank blade in pure damage, and he'll absolutely have no issues obtaining aggro. With an evasion art on every driver, he'll be able to dodge all the dangerous attacks of any enemy that may happen to target him. His level 2 special is also pretty strong as an effect even if it's fairly slow. With his conditions met, his damage will not disappoint, and he can function as one of the better tanks in the game since he will have much easier time keeping aggro. As an additional bonus, he resists Doom as a Dark Blade, and he also gets a smash art on Morag. However, his other two battle skills are never going to be super useful regardless of the situation. HP is already pretty easy to keep up through a variety of means, and humanoids are pretty rare as an enemy type outside of unique monsters, so that ability will never work on anyway. And if he's not in a multi-enemy fight, then you should forget about it. His damage sucks in these scenarios with only one aux core slot and specials being relatively slow, and his utility is easily outclassed by the other katana blades as well. He also is probably the least defensive as a tank in the entire game, which means he relies a lot on his evasion art and healing sources to remain effective. If you're against a single enemy, don't bother using him. Otherwise, he can be pretty decent. And at number 32, we finally get to the last shield hammer and probably the only DLC blade that did not contribute to major power creep. On paper, there's a lot to like about Poppi Buster. Speeds up the sluggish animations of the terrible shield hammer weapon? That's great. Gets him with strong 100% damage additive and 3 aux core slots to easily outdamage the non-DLC shield hammers? Fantastic! Gets 30% damage reduction with massive defense to be one of the tankiest blades in the game after fellow Poppi forms? That's a wonderful perk as well. Buster even gets a very powerful level 4 special that can do a lot of damage in extended fights, and has the same access to topple, launch, and shield hearts as the other hammers. Truly, if you wish to use a shield hammer, then Poppi Buster is the absolute best of the class. But there's just one small problem. Being the best shield hammer is like being the best football player in your high school. You're still a small fish. The longer cooldowns of shield hammers make sped up art animations not exactly a big deal, and you don't really do any major damage of significance unless you're player controlling Buster, since AI cannot use level 4 specials. Poppi Buster cannot tank unless she gets aggro, which also likely won't happen unless player controlled. Low critical rate and a terrible weapon class still heavily limit the potential of Buster as a blade. And while she's definitely better than the other pure shield hammers, to make matters even worse for Buster, it is the definition of an outclassed blade. It isn't like we got a shield hammer clone with sped up animations by default with much better cooldowns and higher ratios who's the exact same element type as well. It isn't like this blade easily outdamages Buster and even offers more defensive utility as a blade into a team with strong evasion buff and a vision mechanic to block lethal attacks. Oh wait, we did. Shulk's very existence means Poppi Buster is outclassed in basically every way, and the reasons to use this character basically extend to having decent hit specials with some AoE. Otherwise, you're better off using Shulk over any hammer. And once again, I'm going to have to apologize to Nia fans. Not only is she the worst driver, but she's also just not super useful as a blade either. And the reason for this is that all she does is heal. She's probably better at this over the course of the game than any other blade, but as you get into post-game, pure healing is typically outclassed by other ways of sustaining or other better options from blades who can offer more. Her healing is extremely strong from the time you get her all the way into post-game, and if you need a consistent safety net for healing, she is absolutely the best option you can probably use. Everything she does, from existing to auto-attacking to even getting attacked, involves healing. Pretty much nothing except one-shots is going to be an issue for your team. She's also got some decently powerful arts with high ratios, and one art even goes through the defense of enemies to hit hard against higher defense foes. Her 3 Aux core slots gives her a lot of versatility for a healer, and she can try to stack up damage to become a threat there. But even with all these positives, her damage is mostly going to be weaker, and not to mention she can only be used on Rex, and that can limit Rex's potential for damage. You also lose access to Driver Nia, which admittedly isn't a huge loss. Her lower hit count and lower ratio specials aren't very useful outside of maybe her level 3 having the longest range of any special in the game for 100 meters, which can be useful if there's a lot of spread out enemies. Overall, she's not going to really offer much outside of her massive healing though, and because of this she scales weakly as a blade into post-game, which is what most of this list is based off of, so as such she isn't going to be an overly useful blade. And that is going to cover it for this section of the list. Tune in tomorrow and we'll likely have some more positive things to say about many of the blades. As per usual, if you enjoyed this and want to see more content in the future from this game as well as Golden Country, please be sure to like and subscribe. I would very much appreciate that as it helps me out quite a bit. If you have any additional input or disagree with this list, feel free to let me know in the comments. Once again, I would like to thank everyone who helped me with this. All the links for them are in the description, as well as links to the large Discord server where you can find all of us, and my Twitter account, which I might start using more, so feel free to follow me there. And with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching and have a blessed day.